started. Thank you all for coming out this morning. Very nice turnout. Pleased to see so many people. Welcome to the League First Friday. I am Margaret Copey, convener of the League of Women Voters of Lexington. Today is Friday, March 3rd, 2023. Thank you to the staff of Cary Library for their help and cooperation in presenting today's program. And assisted listening devices are available at the table in the back of the room. This program is the sixth in the 2022-2023 First Friday Forum series, hosted by the League of Women Voters, to promote awareness and understanding of public policy issues. There will be time for question and answers after the program. LexMedia is recording today's program. It will be available on demand on their website, lexmedia.org. All League forums are free and open to the public. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to the principles of self-government established in the Constitution of the United States. The League works to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. For more information, you can contact me at my email, which I'll give you, but I know that's hard when you're talking. mecopey@gmail.com. All League forums are free. Oh, we already said that. Okay. Today, we welcome Jill Hay, Chair of the Lexington Select Board and Chair of the Special Permit Residential Development Ad Hoc, the SPRD Ad Hoc Zoning Committee. This topic will be a zoning warrant article coming to the 2023 annual town meeting, and I'm going to let Jill introduce the rest of the participants today. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Jill.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. We do have, actually, I'm going to say we have a quorum, so we need to be careful because we can only have 4 of us because we did not post this as an SPRD meeting. So no more than 4 of us will speak, but I'm going to introduce all of us. So I think Margaret just did a pretty good job. I'm Jill Hay. We have Wendy Mans, who is also a member of the committee, Betsy Weiss, Dick Perry, and of course Charles Hornig. And I just want to go through quickly and give you a rundown of the other members of the committee who could not be with us today. Joyce Murphy, Scott Cooper, Heather Hartshorn. I think that's everybody right now. And those members represent the planning board, the select board, a realtor, a developer. Heather's the head of the Chamber of Commerce. Betsy has been a long-time housing advocate. Scott is a commercial real estate lawyer. Did I cover everybody? I think I did. So this was a group that was intentionally put together by the select board to represent as many different views as possible that were relevant to the development of housing in Lexington. And the committee was formed in response to a citizen article that was brought to town meeting in 2018, attempting to make a change as an individual to this same section of the bylaw. And town meeting referred it back to the select board to make sure that in fact it was done in a more collaborative and cohesive and well-rounded manner. So that is how this committee came to be, and we have in fact been working on this since 2018. And the first several years we spent really on a listening tour, and we're going to get into those details as we get to the slides. But just for framing purposes, the committee was charged with looking at only this one provision of the bylaw. We stumbled onto many other things that we think would be great to change about zoning in Lexington, but it was outside of our charge. This particular section 6.9 was created in order to provide an alternative to the development of the standard conventional subdivision, which can happen under state law by right. And we've seen those happen around town for years, and that's sort of that what gets nicknamed the McMansion development, large single-family homes. So in an effort to create an alternative that would be appealing to a developer to choose instead of the standard single-family home on a lollipop drive, the planning board had created section 6.9, which had 3 elements to it. We didn't feel it was getting where we wanted, so this is how this committee came to be. The balancing trick is to find something that someone who already owns a parcel of land which is eligible for a conventional subdivision will find to be an attractive alternative. You can't force anybody to do anything because the state law gives them the right to do a conventional subdivision. So how do we give them an incentive to do something that will still be economically feasible for the person who has made an investment into that property, but provide what the town has said on our values and our interests and our goals is the kind of housing we want to develop. So it's a very head of a pin balance point to find that. And we hope that that's what we have done. And we're going to walk you through that today. But that balance is the key to making this work. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind, that the alternative to Article 33 obviously is continuing the status quo exactly as it is, which allows a builder to just decide to put up a conventional subdivision, which has been largely what we have seen, or to do something that is being done today. We're trying to move the needle towards something new. So with that, I'm going to let Wendy walk us through the details.
No, thanks a lot, Jill. You put in a lot of good stuff that I been good framing for our project here. So if we can move to from our title slide, one of the first things that we did, move to the next one, is after taking input to form a statement of values that would guide our work, and this is a capsule version of it. We seek greater diversity in housing to meet the needs of families and individuals of different circumstances in town. And we expect that homes that would be built under the models that we propose would be built to sustainable standards and meet the town's expectation of quality design. Go ahead. So we formulated some goals, and the top goal here is our overriding, kind of our umbrella goal, to find attractive alternatives to building conventional subdivisions. Under that, we're looking for smaller, more affordable, and sustainable homes. Accessible design that's suitable for persons for all abilities, design and siting that's conducive to neighborhood interaction. Of course, we want to increase the number of affordable homes to meet our subsidized housing inventory obligations, and also, if possible, to address our workforce needs. And finally, to have zoning regulations that are clear, predictable, and time certain for applicants as well as for the board. These are a couple of examples that they're not specific to Lexington, and they're not, proposed buildings, but they're examples of what might be built. We've looked at the possibility of including more than one housing unit within a single building in order to get smaller and more affordable units. And these are just examples. On the left is the duplex, and on the right, the fourplex. This is an example from Concord, Riverwalk, where the houses are individual houses, but built to a smaller scale, and around a grassy, shared open space area. So this is a summary of our recommendations. We recommend that the existing site-sensitive development model, which is in the zoning bylaw now, be updated. We're proposing to replace the balanced housing development model and the public benefit development model. There are going to be fewer models for you to remember. We're going to substitute, we hope, the compact neighborhood development model. For both of those, there will be an inclusionary, that is, affordable housing component. And after considerable discussion, we opted for using the site plan review process for the planning board to use with these projects rather than the special permit process. So to go into a bit more detail on the site-sensitive development. Currently, site-sensitive developments have had some success in more imaginative siting because there's no requirement for lot size, but only single-family homes are permitted, and there has been no inclusionary requirement. So our amendments to site-sensitive include permitting a variety of housing types so that you can have, as you've seen from the pictures above, you can have a duplex, a single-family home, a multi-family home, depending on how they configure the lot. Would require inclusionary dwelling units, and it would, I'm going to read this, the gross floor area would be limited for the size of the buildings, but the number of units within the buildings would not be limited. I'd like to back up a little. It's not here on the slide, but we started from the point in the existing zoning where, as Jill has pointed out, this addresses subdivisions. It doesn't address individual lots. In order to have a subdivision, if you're a builder, you need 2 buildable lots. In the RO district, that's 30,000 square feet per lot. In the RT and RL districts, it's 15,500 square feet per lot. So you need 2 lots, 2 contiguous lots. And then the zoning bylaw provides a formula that calculates the gross floor area that you can build on the parcel that you have. So we start from that point. Then we add, in the case of each of our new models, we add 15% gross floor area to that to allow for the inclusionary housing, for the affordable housing. And we add an additional 15% at market rate as a density bonus to the builder to help defray the cost of building the affordable units where there is not the same profit. We have also, after listening to the community, and this has been very helpful because we've had some very specific input from the community, we require 15% of the total gross floor area to be open space. It has been our feeling that the way these are configured, you're likely to get 15% open space in any case, but we wanted to make the requirement explicit so that the community would know that we want these to be attractive and livable developments. And finally, in site sensitive, we want to have, we explicitly say that they're to be designed to preserve natural features, native trees, and particularly historical or architecturally significant buildings that are located on the site. Okay, so this is moving to our second model, the compact neighborhood development. Here too, we would permit a variety of housing types depending on what configuration works for the site. We would have the 50% additional gross floor area to allow for affordable units, and a further 15% as the density bonus as in the previous one. But the salient part of this project, this model, is that we would limit the maximum size of single homes to 2,800 square feet, with an average of not to exceed 2,250 square feet with gross floor area. And you could readily see that that would yield homes considerably smaller than the ones we've been seeing recently. Another example, these are not specific examples of Lexington, but they give you an idea of the scale. The little house on the left is 2,800 square feet, and the condominium unit on the right is 1,780 square feet. Now, this is an interesting comparison. We recently had a new development built on Lexington Meadows, Lily Pond Lane. You may be familiar with it. And after consultation with the planning board and so on, it yielded 21 units with 1 moderate-priced unit, which was the best that the planning board could negotiate under the existing statute. This is a schematic showing what could have gone on that same lot. And you'll see that it yields, I want to read this correctly, but I think it's 47 townhouse units in 13 buildings. And of course, with our proposal, 15% of that would be affordable housing. And you note that it's built around a grassy shared area. It's showing that a very attractive development can be built to the scale that we're describing on the parcels that can be found in Lexington. So to talk about the inclusionary requirement.
Wendy, could you hold?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Is this better? Yes, okay. So I've said several times, we require 15% of the gross floor area to be inclusionary, and of that 15%, we would require that 2/3 of that be affordable to households earning 80% or less of the area median income, which is the low end of affordability. And that would permit those units to go on our subsidized housing inventory, which we need, as you know, to maintain. The additional market rate units would be permitted to defray the cost. And in developments of 6 or fewer units, we would permit payments in lieu of building the unit to go into the newly formed housing trust. And we do this because If you have a small development of 6 or fewer units, you may find that your 15% yields 2/3 of a unit, or something to that. Something like that. It makes it more difficult to fit in, and our building professional can address that. But in any case, if the builder decides it's a better option, payment can be made into the trust. And the payment would be calculated based on the square foot cost of building the 15%. And that's how it would be very obviously with the time and the building costs at that time and the size of the project. But that's what would be paid into the housing trust. So we looked at the review process. Currently under the statute that you may be familiar, there are 2 pathways to the planning board if you want to get a building project approved. Site plan review and special permit review. And we looked at both processes. They're in some ways very similar, and I want to emphasize that each of them contains in the statute a number of provisions for areas that the planning board can review and oversee and impose conditions on. The site plan review differs from the special permit process in that it is less open-ended. With site plan review, if the builder meets the written requirements of the bylaw, there is a presumption of approval. But the builder must still come to the planning board and work out the conditions that we've described. So it's not by any means a free pass. It does, however, be more expeditious, and there's a surer outcome for builders who come to the planning board. And because it tends to involve fewer hearings and a surer outcome, it's less expensive and in that way more attractive to builders. And we hope that's one of the things that will make these models more attractive to builders. Okay. I wanted to include this list because, and I'll let you look at them, but it shows the areas that site plan review encompasses from the statute, so that the planning board can look at these various aspects and condition the project in an appropriate way. And they're all important, but for example, the buildings of historic significance get special attention and would be preserved. Number 2, sustainable, climate sensitive, and environmentally conscious design. These are all things, you can read the list, but these are all things that the planning board would look at under site plan review. So this is our Article 33, and we think that it advances the select board's goal of, as Jill has expressed it, to have more small and sustainable homes. Is consistent with our recently completed comprehensive plan. And one thing that I haven't really touched on here, and I think sometimes when we've been working on this for so long, it seems to go without saying, but there is a great need for more housing across the Commonwealth, as you will know, and certainly in Lexington. And Carol, if you can skip down to the, no, skip that 1 minute. Still skip it. Yeah, I wanted to have you look at this quickly. This shows the gap between what the incomes are and what is necessary to finance a home in Lexington. If you're making 80% of the area median income for a family of 4, that's, and this varies, of course, it changes over time, but that's approximately $112,150. You will note that to finance an average price home in Lexington, you would need a minimum of $281,500, so about twice. The same is true of rents, that for a maximum affordable rent, it would be $2,154 a month, whereas rents for a 3-bedroom home in Lexington are $4,000 or more. And one more slide. I wanted to show you this because this is a scale of incomes for the people who support and sustain our community. These are the people that we rely on every day, the firefighters, the teachers, the managers of our community, making reasonable incomes. But you will look at these incomes, and only at the very top of the scale, which is the bottom of this chart, you will see that even if you are making $111,838, and even if you have 2 incomes in your household, you are still below the threshold of what would ordinarily finance a home in Lexington. So I don't think this needs much more emphasis, but we recognize that there is a crucial need for a greater diversity in housing, and that's what we've been trying to address. We can do that. Yeah, we maybe should. Do you want to address the process, Jill? Because that is important. Yeah.
So just briefly, as I mentioned at the beginning, we spent, a year and a half or so doing the listening tour with every committee, commission, and group that would, talk to us, from builders, engineers, lawyers who represent builders, developers, the Commission on Disability, the Commission on Aging, the Conservation Commission, everybody we could get. And that's how we first drew up the goals and the statement of vision. We then spent a lot of time working, and again, with a lot of back and forth, to make sure that we were coming up with proposals that both fit the community and were fiscally feasible. And once we got this proposal, we started, I don't even know exactly what the right word is, but we'll say we took it on the road. And we went to the select board a couple of times, we went to the planning board a couple of times, and we went to each of these other events. So based on as you can see, today is, almost the end of the road on the planned public outreach, but if you have other groups that you think would like to hear from us, please let us know. But then, and I think, here we go. So in response to all of that, we've made some changes because we listened to the feedback that we got and we tried to address the concerns. One of the concerns originally, we had, as Wendy explained, we had given a 15% market rate bonus in GFA to the builders to allow them to do 15% more of a building that they could sell at the market rate in order to help recoup the loss on the affordable units that we were requiring. And that led originally to our allowing a larger total building size. And what we heard was nobody wanted buildings that big. So we reduced back to exactly what the GFA table is today. So there, somebody comes in and builds a conventional subdivision, they can put in X number of houses, whatever the proof plan says, at, depending on the district, either 9,350 square feet or 7,030 square feet. What they can build under this would be exactly the same size buildings, but there's now a freedom that they could put more than one unit in those buildings, which there would not be in a conventional. But then, in order to still allow them to make use of the increased GFA that we're allowing, we had to allow a greater number of buildings. And so that calculation is essentially the minimum number of buildings required to accommodate the allowable GFA. So the groups with whom we spoke seemed to feel that having one or two extra buildings rather than much larger buildings was preferable. So that was one. Wendy talked about the inclusion of the 15% common open space being a requirement. We also tagged, because all of our calculations were based upon the existing GFA table, we actually embedded that calculation into the bylaw. So if we want in the future to change it, we can, but for today, we know that this works. As we mentioned, this was about 4.5 years of calculation and testing, and we know that this works, this breaks even. So we have now embedded that into this table. And I realized the one thing that we didn't cover in here is the meaning of GFA, which is gross floor area. And in Lexington, we do that a little differently than a lot of our surrounding communities. The gross floor area of a building in Lexington includes basements, walk-up attics, garages, covered porches. Several of those elements are not included in our neighboring communities' definitions of GFA. So when you look and say, well, the GFA in such and such a community is actually only 2,200, or you look at this and say 2,250 sounds really large, a standard 2-car garage is about 600 square feet, and that's on the small side. A porch, if you have, a nice porch, that can be 200 square feet of GFA. So when you start backing those things out, this is all that backwards calculations that we did, a lot of these homes are in fact the kind of smaller, either starter, downsize, or just standard workforce attainable size homes. So, and then I had one other thing the calculation for the payment in lieu that Wendy mentioned, and that number being tagged to a cost of building, that is going to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, but I believe we said that would be something that would be in the planning board's regulations so that it could be pegged and adapted as necessary. It wouldn't require going through town meeting to change it again.
Just to be clear, if there's to be a payment in lieu, the planning board will have ahead of time, on some regular basis, based on changes in construction prices and land prices and all of the other things that factor into the town's or LexHab's or someone's cost to build affordable housing, come up with so many dollars a square foot for people to make a payment in lieu, with the idea that once 100% of the dwelling units worth of payments in lieu have been made, there's actually enough money in our affordable housing trust to fund the building of an affordable unit.
And then the only other thing that I realized I forgot at the very beginning was, did anybody introduce you, Carol? This is Carol Kowalski, our Assistant Town Manager for Development. And today our tech assist, but everybody should know Carol.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So I think that is our presentation, and we're just here to answer questions at this point. And we can move out of the corner if you want, or we can stay over here. All right, so if anybody has questions, we'll share. We'll keep one up here and one can walk around. We did such a good job of silencing everybody.
I have a quick question about the process. This will be voted on at town meeting.
Correct.
And I don't know the warrant article number.
Article 33. It was on one of them.
Okay.
Yes, it's Article 33.
And is that a majority vote or 2/3 vote?
It will be a majority vote. I
That's
checked with the
the
moderator
new
yesterday because it is
state law.
Under the state law, amendments that will provide for housing or allow for housing are majority, not a 2/3.
Right. That's a change from the past, because the 2/3 was quite a hurdle to get over for a lot of projects.
Hi, Raul Marquez, Precinct 7 Town Meeting member. So the 2,800 is the GFA, so that will include basements, and so the living space you could consider 2,000, or how did you come up with the number?
So there's two different numbers. So first of all, 2,800 is the maximum size. But the average for the entire development has to not exceed 2,250. It can be lower than 2,250, but it can't exceed 2,250. And we came up with those numbers after an enormous amount of back and forth and research of what has been being developed over the last several years in projects around the state, not just in Lexington, but what is the living area of, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, the actual living area. And there was a formula that I had been told, and we've heard a lot, that says roughly 20% reduction from whatever our GFA is the living area. I've looked at my house on the town's GIS, and my living area is about 50% of my GFA. I guess I have a big basement and a big attic, because I have a tiny little garage. So it varies. But, the rule of thumb that people have used is the 20%. I don't know how accurate it truly is, but at a minimum, and it may be a higher percent that you lose.
Do you have an idea of how much it will cost one of these new houses?
So we don't.
Are we aiming for
We can't control the market,
No.
unfortunately. What we're all, my Econ 101 class, 30 or so years ago, would tell me though that as we increase the supply, that will drive down cost a little. I don't know that that's really something you can rely on in the Boston area housing market, but that is one piece. But also they are going to be smaller than what is being sold today. That average unit price that we saw for Lexington of $1.5 million for a house, that includes all of these very, very large 8,000 and more square, or up to 8,000 square foot single family houses. And so I think we can assume, and I understand the danger in using that, that the cost of smaller units, potentially multiple to a building, will be lower than where we are today. And let's send this to Charles, who's got much more actual information.
Well, I just looking at some examples in Lexington, and unfortunately there aren't many, so it's hard to generalize a lot, but there have been relatively recent sales of small apartment units, 1,800, 1,900, 2,000 square feet for $800,000 to $1 million. That's new construction, sales of new construction. Sales of things in that size range for that are 20, 30, 40 years old can get down to 700, 600,000. But looking at new construction, certainly the ones that are less than the average we're requiring can easily come in under $1 million, even at current prices. Now, where prices will go in the future is anyone's guess.
I have two questions. One is about the 15% open area, and the other one has to do with the in lieu of providing a unit, you pay a certain amount. So for the 15% open space, I want to have a little better definition as to what will count as open space. And I'm saying that because in last year's town meeting, there was a figure that was circulated of a development, hypothetical development, that actually counted the gap between the houses as open space. And I hope that that's not the case. And to kind of make my point a little clearer, can you show first the slide that shows the compact development? No, that's the second one. But the compact was a little square.
Yeah, the one before that.
The one where we had the,
That's it. So over here, I have a hard time finding where the open space is. And it may be there, it may be clear, but I couldn't see it. So could you go to the other slide now that you had a moment ago? Here, I can see a nice little hole in the middle of all these units, which is a very attractive feature, and that to me is an open space. The other one had no open space. So are you going to let the developers count unusable open space as open space just because there's no building in it and no driveway? That is really a key thing to my voting or not voting for this. So I have the second question.
Well, this is actually a topic we talked about a fair amount last year when we were talking about open space residential development, which require quite a bit more open space. They also required two different kinds of open space, what we call that open land, which is protected by a conservation restriction and is kept in a natural state, and common open space. And there is a definition for common open space in the bylaw. It's land within or related to a development which is not individually owned and which is designed and intended for the common use or enjoyment of the residents of the development, and may include such complementary structures and improvements as are necessary and appropriate. Now, that's a somewhat broad definition that's intended to allow common space, common outdoor space in a development that is useful to the whole residents of the whole development, not an exclusive use, not for the exclusive use of a single unit. Now, this broad definition is fleshed out, or will be additionally fleshed out by planning board regulations implementing site plan review. So we may get a lot more specific about how much we care about it being in one piece or allowing it to be in multiple pieces, and appropriate locations for it so that it is practically accessible. There's no point in putting a common open space in someone's where it looks like it's part of someone's backyard, because it will be treated as exclusive space. So, but the really important part of the definition is that it's commonly owned and it is commonly usable by all the residents of the development. But there's no specific requirement beyond that, other than what the planning board will be a bit more specific than the bylaw definition.
Charles, I just want to add one thing. So Charles gave you the technical answer. I'm also going to tell you that drawing that was on the page that said CND, that came out of a drafter's notebook of examples in like a guidebook of what is a CND. That is not actually a CND that would fit necessarily our bylaw. That's just showing you a picture of what a CND a compact neighborhood could be. The other one is actually a real project in Lexington that would fit under these guidelines.
The second question that I had was the delay of creation of an affordable unit, inclusionary housing in general, in view of a certain amount of money that will be paid into the.
Can you bring that up a
I
little
can't hear you. Yeah, if you hold the microphone parallel, it's much clearer.
Yeah, I'm trying to do. Okay, good.
There we go.
Just try to speak a little more loud. And basically, I never understood somehow why it is better to accept the money expediently instead of having the developer create that unit right on site at the same time that all those market rate units are created. That is the best time for the town. It's the worst time for the developer, but that should not be the rule of the decision. We should acquire that unit or those units immediately at the same time that we're acquiring the market rate units, which will worsen the fraction of the 40B considerations. So that's my position on that. Thank you.
Was that a question or just a position?
I think Mr. Galitzis is asking why we're doing payment in lieu rather than creating a unit right at the moment for the less than 6 unit.
So this would only apply to the very smallest developments, those that produce 6 or fewer apartments. And in those small developments, if we required 15% of the gross floor area to be in an inclusionary dwelling unit, that inclusionary dwelling unit would have to be much smaller than the other dwelling units in the development, because even in a 5-unit development, 15% of that it would have to be 75% of the average size of the market rate dwelling units. And because of that, it would stand out as an inclusionary dwelling unit. And that was very important to us, that the inclusionary dwelling units fit in with the rest of the development. So there's a certain size of development that is so small that the inclusionary piece of it, which we can't make bigger because of the economics of it, would result in a 200 square foot or 600 square foot dwelling unit for the inclusionary piece that just wouldn't fit the development and wouldn't achieve our goals for integrating inclusionary housing. So for those very small developments, we're making a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust, which can produce affordable housing, on its own, and with the new LexHab, it'll be able to do it in a cost-effective way. There obviously haven't been any of these built yet. All but the smallest of these new special residential developments will have more than 6 dwelling units, and will have the inclusionary dwelling units in the development.
So it is clear in the bylaw. I must have missed something then in the draft. Oops. getting feedback. I must have missed something in my reading of the proposed change. So you're saying that it is very clear that developments that have more than 6 units cannot take the financial way out. Correct. Thank
The
you.
payment in lieu provision is in 6.9.8.6, and it starts, a special residential development with 6 or fewer market rate dwelling units shall be permitted to meet the requirements of this section by making a payment in lieu. So it's right there at the beginning of the sentence. Thank you.
Gloria Bloom, Precinct 4. I have a few simple questions. This says the 11-acre site includes protected stream and wetlands. So are they getting square footage based on property they could never build on anyway because of conservation laws?
So Monroe Brook flows through the middle of this site. The area that they are permitted to build is based on a proof plan, which is what they could build under a conventional subdivision. So the developer of this property in real life a few years ago, or in a hypothetical future, would have to lay out a conventional subdivision that meets the requirements of state and town laws, including protection. There's an easement that protects the brook. There's a whole lot of different considerations there. They get a certain layout of what the conventional subdivision would look like. And then what they can build under this is based on a formula based on that conventional subdivision. So the constraints of the site, and the site has a brook, it has an easement protecting the brook, it has a very odd shape. We're only showing you half the site. There's this whole piece of the site that sticks off on the side that is difficult to use. Shall we say, but what they can build is based on a real-life scenario of a conventional subdivision.
I have a question on, if 15% is inclusionary but only 10% is affordable, what are the criteria for the other 5%?
Well, so first of all, any house is affordable to somebody.
Right.
So we're avoiding the use of the word affordable.
State definition.
15% is inclusionary. That means it's price limited. There's a permanent restriction on the price of the unit. Of that, 2/3, which is 10% of the original, is limited. Has to be eligible for the subsidized housing inventory, which means it has to be affordable to low-income households, those that make less than 80% of the area median income. The remainder has to be price limited, and I just want to make sure I say the right thing.
Charles, just also hold your mic just parallel so everyone can hear you better.
You think I'd know better at this point.
I know.
After all of these years. The rest of it will have to meet planning board guidelines. It's what the planning board has been calling this workforce housing. The planning board has guidelines that say this housing is price limited for people who cannot afford to buy in Lexington. Right now, the upper bound of that is somewhere around 150%, but it's something that planning board guidelines would perhaps be adjusted in the future based on the housing market. So it's intended for people who make between 80% and for now at least 150% of the area median income.
Well, I recently looked up the area median income, and it's about $88,000 for the Boston area, but it's $200,000 for Lexington. So what's the area that you're using?
This is based on the HUD, that's the Boston Quincy area.
So that would be like an income of $60,000. I'm not sure what the size of the family is, or if that's an individual, but it would be
No, it's
based
higher
on.
than that.
Yeah, the Boston area, it said, was 88. So Lexington is skyrocketed.
Now this is about, HUD has a standard area.
Yeah.
Center of
Some
Boston. And household area median income depends on the size of the household. So
Right.
and we use a household of one more than the number of bedrooms. And there is, I can look up the number now in about 5 minutes, but I believe it is much higher than $60,000.
No, 80% of it hit. 88 minus 20%.
Should have been on one of those
So we
slides.
have it,
We got like 100 and, yeah,
16.
we had it on one of the slides.
112, I think.
It was for a family of 4 at 80%, it was 112.
Because it may be the family of 4 that
And again, this,
increases it from the 88,
Right, because it's
Which
scales,
is-
1, 2, 3, 4 members.
which is a household income for all size households, I assume.
Well, no, there's a
no,
different,
it's
there's
scale
a
from the
table.
size of the
No,
house.
but when they give you a Boston
There
area
you go.
median income,
Right here.
okay, there you go. So,
Well, that's a little out of date.
It's
well,
2021.
it's, yeah.
It's only gone up.
But this is
It
what
does-
the
it does vary
HUD
over time.
currently uses, even though it says 2021, this is still what they currently use.
Okay, so,
And you can see on the left is the number of members of the household, and across the top is the percentage of the
So
area median
it's-
income.
68,000 for the single person, and
100.
whatever the average household was around 90, and that runs through the whole. If you have more than 6 people, you don't get extra credit? No. Thank you.
You're on your own over there.
Tad Dickinson, 40 Hancock Street. I know you've heard me before. Could you go back to the slide with the, yes, thank you. First, I applaud this effort. This is an excellent effort to get smaller housing. I started in a 1,200 square foot house here in Lexington. What I'm trying to grasp is why will the developer want to go for this? Certainly if a developer has a choice between building a 5,000 square foot house and two 2,500 square foot houses, they'll build the 5,000 square foot house. Where's the math? It would be nice to see what the option to this is if you built to normal subdivision regulations.
So we know because they did. So Charles.
Well, actually, this one was built as a balanced housing development under our old rules. They could have built 9 large single-family homes. They chose instead to build 5 buildings, which between them contain 21 dwelling units of varying sizes, all larger than what we would permit under this. We've ratcheted down our maximum dwelling unit size. And they chose to do that because they felt that they could build, market, and sell those and presumably make some money. We have now, 15 years of experience with our current special permit residential development bylaw that shows that sometimes developers prefer to build the conventional development with the $3 million houses, and sometimes they prefer to do something else. What's our most recent PhD? There are plenty of them around town. Plenty of developers who have built developments with duplexes and triplexes under the old version of this bylaw because they feel that it meets their marketing needs. To some extent, it depends on the site. To some extent, it depends on the developer. We sat down and we've run numbers on hypothetical developments. Ms. Perry worked with us, and Ms. Joyce Murphy, who's a real estate professional, bringing different kinds of expertise to it, and ran the numbers. And we believe that in this sort of generic case, this would be financially attractive to a developer who didn't have preconceived preferences. Now, if the builder is building for himself and wants a big house, he will not go this approach. If a builder has a well-defined marketing network for building, for selling apartments, smaller apartments, they'll absolutely go with this approach. So it depends on the biases of the builder, the characteristics of the site. But financially, these are feasible. It'll be up to the owners of the land to decide whether to use it.
Thank you. It was just, I know, being an engineer, I think I like to see the numbers, just to make sure there is an incentive. I do. Okay, I have no issue with the, with CND and this plan. It's a great plan. Thank you.
Pressman, 22 Locust Ave. Now, Wendy referred before to 80% or less of AMI, and then the chart that was just shown had 50% AMI, at 80% AMI. What do you think will determine whether the people who get inclusionary units will be at 50% of AMI or 80% of AMI, or 79% of AMI? Then I have a second question after
Carol,
that.
isn't that determined by the regional housing? Doesn't that go through? Can I borrow your mic for a moment, please?
I think I'm interpreting Mr. Pressman's question as, how do we know if these inclusionary zoning units, the 10%, will be priced at, or at, up to 80%, or if they would be priced at very low income?
Charles, do you know?
I'm going to say this a little differently. If you want to look at the households who live here's income is going to be determined by their jobs. So that any given household will have some income. What we're really talking about here is what is the price limit that will be placed on these apartments that makes them affordable to people at various incomes. And the requirement here is that the limit on the price make it affordable to someone who happens to make exactly 80%, who makes actually between 70 and 80% of the affordable median income based on a whole lot of formulas from HUD. But all we're setting is the maximum price. The actual income of the people who move in is determined on whether they feel they can afford the unit given that maximum price.
Well, okay, I was more interested in rental and whether, as a practical matter, some persons with greater need who are at 50% AMI are going to get some units. But I'll move to my second question. Do any of you see a way in which, let's say, if the select board sought CPA money to be available to help leverage this occurring and making some of the units affordable to persons at lower AMI, that could work?
I was going to say, certainly something that the town is permitted to do is to, in addition to setting these permanent restrictions on price that are private restrictions that are deed riders recorded in the registry of deeds, the town can provide rental subsidies. That is, they can provide people with some extra money that lets someone who makes, say, 50% of the area median income afford a unit that's price limited. That would be out of their range because its price limit is too high. It's not something the town has done significantly so far, but certainly the town could. I'm sure Ms. Kowalski wants to.
Thank you.
I also want to add that we have the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Study Committee with us, Catherine Roy, and Catherine knows that finally with this Lexington's new housing trust, there will be an opportunity to get deeper subsidies so that we can do exactly what Mr. Pressman is suggesting, along with CPA funds. And with the change to LexHab, they will be able to produce more affordable housing more economically and more efficiently and faster too. So the short answer, I think, to Mr. Pressman's question is yes. There will be a number of new ways we can get deeper subsidies than just the 80%.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add that the select board did in fact allocate, I think it was $500,000 earlier this year to LexHab to make a purchase of a single family home using our ARPA funds. And that there is an article in the town meeting warrant this year. I think it's $1.5 million to seed, Carol, is that right? Yeah, Catherine? So it's $1.5 million to seed the Affordable Housing Trust. So it could do things like buy into one of these developments and, so that whatever is required to be developed at the 15% is, but the housing trust, which will have been seeded by these partial payments, partial unit payments, could then be converted into a full unit, and we could potentially purchase additional units in any one of these developments. And that is something other communities have done as well.
I am Margaret Heights in Precinct 4. You probably said this before, but is there an example a person can drive to? I mean, is there an actual development that this is an example of?
Well, so this is an example of what could have been and an opportunity that we lost. But Riverwalk in Concord is something, there is a development, I've forgotten the name. We all did a lot of these road trips. So there's something in Bedford from several years ago now that's up off of, I'll get the address. There's one in Newbury that I went and visited. There's a different one, Carol, that you went to.
Devon's has something similar. They're single family units, but they're clustered like this with a common open, a common. We have a list. We do. We can put that on the website, I suppose.
Yeah, we can do that there. So there are a lot of these cluster developments these have been very popular around the community, around the Commonwealth, but there also are some examples, and we have them in the slideshow from Amanda from about a year ago, of single-family homes in Newton and Brookline that were sort of historic-looking, that existed, and then were then built out a little into the back. So from the street, the neighbors, it was just yet another house, sort of like that brick that we showed at the beginning, but it now has actually four entire living units in it. But there is no visible real difference in the neighborhood from having just a large single-family home that in those cases previously existed in, what we're allowing under SSD. It could be what's being built, but instead of having each of those, large single-family looking homes, they would in fact be multiple unit homes.
Yeah, Phil Johnson, Precinct 6. In the comparison of higher density developments, I wonder if either of these two would be acceptable models. There's been mention of Riverwalk in Concord. I have friends who have moved into Riverwalk, and I spent a fair amount of time there. In addition to the higher density, which it represents, it also has sustainability objectives, and all the houses there are designed to be net zero. As a consequence, however, I think the average selling price is over $1 million. So I don't know to what extent the compromises with density and sustainability drive against the objective of affordability. So I just, I would encourage everybody to go up and look at it because it's a really interesting model of higher density single family homes. The other example I wonder about its applicability to people who are trying to imagine what higher density would look like is the mixed-use development on Bedford Street next to the Alexander Pizza strip zone, which is a sizable number of units, but they're studios and one-bedroom units, as a consequence of which, even at market, I suspect that they're going to be more affordable. And I think there's some imposition of a percentage of affordability on them as well. But if people are kind of interested in what this might look like, there are two examples that we might take a look at that are higher density. One is Riverwalk in Concord, and the other is the mixed use on Bedford Street.
186. 186.
I just want to follow up on that last remark. What is the impact of the sustainability requirements on the development? I heard the question, but I didn't hear that it was posed as something you want to comment on. Thanks.
Look back, it's in the goals. Right.
So, when people
People talk about sustainability requirements, they can mean a lot of different things. When we're talking about sustainability in this bylaw, we're talking about doing the stormwater in a sensible way and trees and that sort of thing. A lot of times in Lexington, when people are talking about it, they're talking about building energy use. That's controlled not by our bylaws, but by the building code. So the rules for what happens inside the walls of the building are going to be the same for these buildings as they are for any new building built in Massachusetts. They'll be controlled by the state stretch energy code, the municipalized. If we adopted at this town meeting the municipal specialized energy code, and if we adopted at this town meeting the fossil fuel ban. And those costs would be the same whether you're going this route or you're going a conventional route. So we're the added costs for the sorts of sustainability things that are happening in site design are pretty minimal compared with the costs of constructing the building. Mr. Perry can expand on that if he wants.
Just the inherent nature of the building.
Yeah, but the big piece of the costs, whether positive or negative, is going to happen in the building, not on the site.
Energy conservation in new home construction is going to change dramatically over the course of this next year and a half. There already has been some updates that went into effect on January 1st. Some others are going to kick in on July 1st. And then in 2024, even more restrictive. And basically it's going to be higher insulation, all electric, no fossil fuels, and very energy efficient because you have to meet a HERS rating of 45, which is a pretty low number, and there's a possibility it might even go down to 42. And HERS, for those that don't know, HERS rating is a system of rating the energy efficiency of a dwelling unit.
Is that something currently in the requirements, or is that something proposed?
I'm sorry.
Is that something currently in our Lexington requirements, or is that something that's proposed and has to be voted on?
No, that's actually state building code.
State. Okay, thank you.
Just to add a point on that, until this stretch energy code, if we wanted to have more sustainability in this model, we'd be potentially putting it at a disadvantage with conventional. But now the playing field is somewhat leveled because all new residential development will have to meet the stretch energy code that Mr. Perry has described. So that's helpful too.
Thank you. I think we've come to the end of our questions, and I want to thank the audience for participating in this. And just a couple of announcements. Our next First Friday will be held April 7th here. The topic is to be determined. Had a little bit of a problem with scheduling, but we'll get that straightened out. The Lexington Town election is Monday, March 5th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We have a voters guide on our website. The League of Women Voters of Lexington website has a voter guide that you can look at. There is a gathering at the depot sponsored by Dawn McKenna, former select person, and everyone's welcome to show up and mingle and get the election results. Given that we only have one precinct, 7, that has a race and it's for one person, the election results are not as exciting as in some past years. Town meeting is starting on Monday, May 20th, and of course it's going to be in person this year at Carey Hall.
March 20th.
March 20th.
Well, I wrote MA and it looked like MA. March 20th, thank you. And it will be in person this year at Carey Hall. And then I wanted to put in a little plug for something the town is doing right now called participatory budgeting. Have any of you done it? I did it.
Yes.
Okay, you go online and you get it's almost like playing a game. You're given a $500,000 budget and you're given a list of about 13, 15 items that range from low to high. And you can spend your $500,000 on any combination of those you want. Can't go over $500,000. It only takes a few minutes to do, but I have to share with you that I picked up my grandsons and the neighbor yesterday, and in the back seat of the car, the fifth grader was telling the other ones about how they voted in school and the kid, and he knew. They said, "What did you vote on?" He said, "Well, a light at Clark and sidewalks and he didn't use the word orchard, a garden, dog park. Dog park was the winner with the kids, by the way. But I was very impressed that I don't know that all teachers in all schools were doing this, but at least one teacher was, and that the kids absorbed it. And because it was almost like a game, they bought into it. So if you haven't done it yet, please do. When is that open till, Jill?
I think it's the end of the month. I actually don't know exactly.
Yeah, I don't
We
either.
left it up for several weeks, and we encourage everyone to participate. And we specifically said that we wanted kids as well, because everybody should participate. And that, by the way, is funded through ARPA funds. That was a designation that the select board made with $500,000 of our federal funds.
Thank you all.
I was just going to add one other thing.
Sure.
You mentioned about so town meeting is in person this year, and it starts on the 20th. And I just want to say we're using a slightly new system this year. Those of you who've been in town meeting long enough to remember the keypad thing for voting, we are going to have tablets instead this year that will be distributed just like the keypads were. On March 15th, the Town Meeting Member Association Next Information Night, if you come at 5:30, I believe, there will be an opportunity to test out those pads so that you can figure out how they work and see what it is if you have any questions about the technology. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that.
And one last thing about town meeting, parking. There is almost no parking left around because some of it is even disappearing for some project that's going on with the new police station, the stormwater containment thing they're going to be building. So those of you who are coming to town meeting, it's like 20 spaces left now around the town hall for the 200 town meeting members.
Lots of parking on Mass Ave.
There is?
Or at the depot lot, you can come down.
Yeah, the depot lot's the best thing.
But there are also metered spots on both sides on Mass Ave at that stretch.
Yeah, but those fill up and, so get there at 4:30, that way you'll get a spot. That's right. So, thank you, we're adjourned. Thank you all.